More with Take Control author Josh Centers on his newest book about iOS 15 and iPadOS 15. This is MacVoices. This edition of MacVoices is supported by Text Expander by Smile, the makers of world-class software. Visit textexpander.com/podcast to learn more and download your free demo. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, this is part 2 in a 2-part conversation with Josh Centers about his new Take Control book, Take Control of iOS 15 and iPadOS 15. The first time around, we talked in general about some of the features that are coming to both operating systems and some of the ones that are being left on the table, at least for now, and why that's not necessarily a bad thing. We pick back up with just some discussions of iPadOS, the beta process, and a whole lot more. So let's go back and let Josh do the talking. We've heard a lot about some of those things, and I'm looking forward to finding out just how useful they are going to be in practice. I loved your example, though, because I've done exactly that. You know, you crawl inside a refrigerator or a stove or, under something, and you need the model number, you need the serial number, and you snap that picture, and it's great. But to be able to then crawl back out first and then take that, copy it, put it into a web search or put it into, something to find exactly what you're looking for is, you're right. That's a little thing, but it's huge because it's a way that you actually use something on your phone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. And another way they're integrating that. So in iOS 14, Apple came out with that Translate app. And I think most people were like, okay, whatever, Google's got one already. So Apple's taking that to the next level with iOS 15. It's on the iPad now, as it should be. And also they've turned Translate into a system-wide service. So you can select text anywhere and you get that little popover and you can tap Translate and you can translate it into English or whatever language you like. And that integrates it with all that text capture stuff, right? So let's say you're in Japan and you see a sign somewhere and there's not an English translation. Well, you can select that text in the camera app and tap Translate and translate it right there in the camera, which is pretty freaky.
Yeah. So I know we've been talking in general, and we've been sort of shifting back and forth. Anything else on the iPad that, since we're all looking at our iPads as more productivity devices than probably ever before, but anything that again jumps out at you, big or small, that you found useful?
It's not a super big iPad year. I think I've covered most of it. Now, one neat little thing they've added that hasn't been talked about much is the iPad has a menu bar of sorts now. So let me pull up. Okay, here we go. I have to check. I have to read my own book to check myself. So you know how in iPadOS 14, and for a few versions now, you can press and hold the Command key on a hardware keyboard, and it pulls up all the keyboard shortcuts in an app, right? So, it's a nice little thing. Well, they've actually turned that into its own sort of menu bar that you can swipe through and select stuff in. So, I don't know how useful that's going to be for people, but it is interesting. It makes the iPad just a little bit more Mac-like. But while the iPad doesn't get a ton of new stuff, I think what it gets is pretty good. I mean, you got the home screen widgets, the app library, Quick Note, the new multitasking stuff. If you're expecting a total overhaul of the iPad this year, you're not going to get it. But I think those are all pretty good things.
Yeah, well, I don't think people want a total overhaul. We all have stuff we want to get done, whether it's business or pleasure. And so, I in some ways, to be honest with you, I kind of like the idea that some of these features, the bigger features, are going to roll out a little bit at a time, because then that way they'll get a little press of their own, if you will. And, that'll be the hot topic for a week, meaning people are more likely to be a little bit aware of it. So I don't know. That's my theory. I don't know if it holds true or not, especially if it's something that you just can't wait for and it's one of the last features they're looking to release. Then I guess it can be frustrating.
I think it certainly has some benefits for users in that you can kind of learn a few other things. You learn things a little slower. I think it also has that benefit for Apple in that that helps them provide greater stability, but it also helps keep excitement going. Right, that's been one of the big debates in streaming media. Netflix likes to take a show and just dump all the episodes at once, and so nobody ever talks about it. And then Disney likes to, bring out one episode a week, and then everyone's talking about the episode when it happens. So I do think there are benefits to kind of drawing it out a little bit. It's just annoying for me as a book author because I'm trying to figure out what to document. Apple keeps changing what's going to be there.
Well, and also, as you said, as you've been writing this book, they've been taking features out, putting them back in, tweaking them, So, Josh, what's your feeling on? Because we've talked about this a number of times on the show. What's your feeling about the public beta process? Is it a good thing? Because it seems to set some people's expectations for things. Is it a bad thing because it means there are more support calls for developers and even to Apple for features that really shouldn't be supported yet or shouldn't be expected to be supported yet?
Mm-hmm. Well, I can't speak for developers. I'm sure they have some of their own challenges, but I mean they had challenges before when people were installing the developer betas and didn't really have business doing that. So I think it's been good overall because we've seen more stable final releases than we used to. I haven't heard about too many people having major problems with the public betas. I mean, I'm sure people have, but I mean, you kind of go into it understanding that you're going to have some issues. You might have some issues. And then also you have things like, for instance, the Safari redesign. I have to wonder if we wouldn't have seen Apple relent on some of that if not for public betas, if Apple didn't have that public feedback. Would it have been like the Apple before, like, no, this design is genius and you're going to love it and everyone's going to love it and be happy, or else. And then people get it day one and it's a litany of complaints and bad press, and then you're using it wrong, and then finally they end up doing the same thing. So I think in stuff like that, I think it helps save Apple a lot of embarrassment. When they come out with something that just not as baked as it should be, it gets a lot more scrutiny, and also it takes away some of this veil of secrecy. I used to every now we don't write tons of stuff, tidbits about the betas, but every now and then I would write something, and there would always be like angry readers who'd say something like, "You signed an agreement with Apple. You have a sacred bond," and I'm like. Steve Jobs might have cared. Tim Cook's never cared. He's never cared, and we've never had a problem from it. No one's ever gotten mad. No one cares because every other Apple publication in the world does the same thing. But now it's all public. It's all out there. I mean, and I think it's for the better. I mean, what did Apple gain from the secrecy? Nothing really. I mean, Google just ripped all their stuff off anyway. So I mean. That hasn't changed. So, I mean, we get more stability, we get more openness, we get more public feedback, and it hasn't seemed to create a support nightmare, at least not at tidbits. I mean, I don't hear from a lot of readers who've installed public betas and then come crying to us for help. I mean, you got to know what you're getting yourself into.
Well, that's interesting perspective on the Safari, because I think you're right, especially with a radical change like that. Maybe the public beta was good for all those people who screamed and yelled about it. But again, we don't know what's going to be in the actual final release. Mm-hmm. So, who knows? Apple may throw the kitchen sink back in, and we'll just go through that period of howling and complaining and all.
Yeah, I mean, really.
Yeah. Josh, I guess the last question, and you may have already answered it. Mm-hmm. How comfortable do you think people can be with installing this day one when it comes out to be released? Is it something, or is it one that you say, well, maybe I'll wait till 15.1?
Well, it's always worth waiting until 15.1. But if you want to install it day, I mean, well, let's break that down in terms of stability. I think it'll be fine. I could be wrong because there have been times, like I mentioned with iOS 13, where the betas were more stable than the actual release. So always worth waiting at least a day or two, see what kind of problems. And also, the good thing about the public betas is you get a much larger testing pool, but still, you're gonna have an even larger testing pool on day one of release. And there might be stuff that no one in the beta had a problem with, and then it becomes a mass issue on day one. So it always pays to wait a few days. Plus, on day one, the servers are going to be slammed. So it's going to take a long time to download. It's going to be frustrating. I don't bother if I didn't already have because I already have like the final version installed by then, and then I turn off the beta certificate, and then I just start rolling with the. I'll get like the 1501 or whatever they come out with after that. If not for that, though, I wouldn't bother on day one because it's too annoying. The other thing to consider too, there's a couple of things you need to consider. One is the Safari redesign, assuming Apple goes with it. You may not be ready for that yet, and if so, that's fine. Adam Inks wrote an article about this at Tidbits a couple of years ago. That's very, very much worth reading anytime big Apple changes are coming, and it's I can't remember the exact title, but it's basically upgrade but on your own terms, right? So for instance, I never installed Catalina on this particular machine because I didn't want to, because I didn't like it. So I kept Mojave on there, and eventually got to the point where I was like, Big Sur came, and I was like, well, sooner or later I'm going to install this. I'm getting too out of touch with the up-to-date Mac user. And then I installed it, and it was a huge mess until this very last update. So, I was kind of still kicking myself until a couple of weeks ago. But the reality is, sooner or later, assuming you stay in the Apple ecosystem, you have to update, right? Like, they're not going to give you a choice. So, if you don't like the way Safari is, and again, remember, and I tell you how to do this in the book, it's very simple. You can undo the Safari change, right? And I don't think there's any other radical changes that are going to throw people off. The third thing, this is like a show in and of itself, and I'm not going to get too far into it here, but if you're concerned about the Apple CSAM detection in photos for privacy reasons, and again, I'm not going to go super deep into that because we could spend. We've spent hours debating it behind the scenes at Tidbits, right? So like, I don't want to open that can of worms, but I have to tell people that's something that's going to be included in iOS 15. It often gets incorrectly called photo scanning. It's not, because the photos are already scanned, but essentially what Apple is doing is, and this for now only applies if you use iCloud Photos, which I think pretty much everyone does, because they really push you into using it. So what happens is, so when Apple's scanning all your photos for handwriting and to see if you have pictures of dogs and all those other features you like in photos, it's also checking to see if you have select images of child sexual abuse, right? Like, that's the sort of the politically correct way of they put it now. And if you do have that, then they call the law on you, basically. So it's a very controversial change. As far as I know, it's not active in iOS 14, but it will be active in iOS 15. And so if you take issue with that, I don't think Apple's going to back down from it. So you're going to have to decide what you're going to do there, whether you're going to stick with Apple or do something else or stay in iOS 14 forever. But that's something you should consider, something you should be aware of, before you go ahead with the update.
MacVoices is supported by Smile, the makers of world-class software like Text Expander. If you are a team leader or a team member, that means consistency of communication with each other and with your customers is more important than ever, but also more difficult than ever. Enter Text Expander. Text Expander from Smile not only saves time and money by automating those words, sentences, paragraphs, or pages so that they can be summoned with just a few characters, it also introduces accuracy and consistency. Each time that snippet is used, it is exactly as created the first time. No individual variations, no typos because you are tired of typing the same thing over and over. That means that once deployed to your team, no matter where they are, they will be using that snippet to respond to customer inquiries and creating documents with exactly what you intended, saving them time and making you look great. Invest a few seconds, literally a few seconds, in creating a text expander snippet and get paid back every single time you use it. And that can mount up to a lot of payments, since you will be using Text Expander multiple times an hour. Find out just how easy it can be to be more accurate and more productive by visiting textexpander.com/podcast right now. Find out some of the ways that a wide variety of businesses use Text Expander to be better. That's textexpander.com/podcast to see what Smile, the makers of world-class software, have to offer you and your business. Thanks to Smile for their ongoing support of MacVoices. Yeah, we too have done some serious discussions here on MacVoices about that, and it's a touchy subject because at least I feel like I can see both sides of it. I understand what Apple's trying to accomplish. I understand the privacy concerns, and I'm not sure there's really a right answer at this point, except to say that if you're not comfortable with it, it's not like Apple is forcing you to use the part of the service that process is being performed on. So then just don't use that part of the service. Seems simple.
Right. Although that's easier said than done, let's be honest.
Well, yeah, that's true too. I mean, yeah, you're in the ecosystem, and the ecosystem comes with some good things and some maybe things that you don't prefer, and so you either have to make some active choices to avoid it, or just let it go and figure that it's one of those things that as long as I'm not engaged in it, it's not going to bother me. So I want to circle way back. Oh, go ahead. Pardon me.
No, I was just going to say, I didn't want to, get into a debate about it. That's a whole other 12 or, 20 shows or so. But, I do just want to let people be aware. That's something to consider.
Yeah. I do want to circle way back because there was something there you said that reminded me a question I wanted to ask you. You said that the on-device Siri is a whole lot faster. Can you give me an idea of what kind of things you found that you feel like are significantly faster?
Well, just just little stuff like pause this, play that, start a timer. Just the really simple stuff you use Siri for. It used to be it like wait and wait and wait and wait, and because they would have to contact a server and do that. And I still have that problem with some things, right? Like there's been a bunch of queries I've had on Siri this past week while I'm sitting in my house. I ask it to do something. It's like seeing the things just spinning. And I don't know what's up with that. I strongly suspect it's because it's trying to get to the right server and blah blah blah. But things like, for instance, if I'm out in the field, like literally out in the field, and I don't have any network connectivity, I was doing this today. I was running some field tests for an article I'm working on, and as I will say, hey. Not going to say it. We're going to say start a timer for 5 minutes, and it was just able to do it. And it's like it took like a second or two. It wasn't as instant as I would like. Maybe iPhone 13 will make it more instant, but I mean it was much faster. Because let's be honest, Siri is often dog slow. At least it is for me. There's oftentimes you ask it to do something, it takes like 10 seconds or more for it to kick in. But for me, it's not so much the speed; it's the fact it does it at all, right? Like that's always been the annoying thing. Like I forget to use Siri because I'm off grid so much of the time, so it's totally useless. But now, I can ask it to do these things, when I'm camping or I'm out in the woods or something, So I might be more inclined to use Siri now, if it's available all the time, if it's more reliable, if it can do things, simple things. I'm not expecting to pull up, stuff from Wikipedia while I'm offline, but like just things like basic playback control, things like timers, stuff like that, that you shouldn't have to make a 3,000-mile round trip to do, that. I'll be more inclined to use Siri if it's more reliable in that sense.
this occurs to me that because this is something I've been kind of wanting for, hoping for, but let's say you're out in the middle of the field and you remember that, hey, I forgot to put, that appointment to, get my haircut on your calendar. Can you tell? Well, I guess that's not a good example because that would be more of a sync issue. But are there things that you can do to queue up something so that it will then go through, once you get reconnected?
That's a good question. Honestly, I haven't tried it yet, but I mean, I can try it now. So I have this in airplane mode. So let's see. Remind me to walk the dog tomorrow. Oh, it won't let me do it unless I turn off airplane mode. Oh. Set a timer for 5 minutes. Okay, so I'll set a timer in airplane mode, but it won't do reminders. So a lot of this stuff's like, just really basic that it will do offline. Which for me is a big improvement, but it might still be some glitches and hiccups here and there.
Well, sure, but this is the only way you find out, and sometimes it's the only way that Apple finds out about the way people want to use their devices. So, and at some point, I keep reminding people this is not magic. It's still technology, and so we still have an evolution of things to get to Star Trek. So, so this interview will go out as when the book is available. Do you have any pricing on it yet, or is that not determined as we record this?
Oh, yeah, it's going to be the same pricing as last year, and Joe just told me. So the new price will be $10.99, which is the same as last year, and I forget what the upgrade pricing was last year. I want to say it was $5.99, something like that. So if you have take control of iOS 14 and iPadOS 14, then you'll pay a cheaper price. But in any case, the book's really cheap. It's about 100 pages long. Starting last year, so for a long time I had the same book. I just updated it and added the new stuff in there, and had a lot of like basic iOS stuff. And based on reader feedback, we cut the. I have one chapter on the basics. But at this point, most people use an iPhone, and know how to use it to some degree. So we focus just all on the new stuff. So it's over 100 pages, almost exclusively on the new stuff, document in and out. So it's be all fresh stuff, and I think that's a pretty cheap book, even if you're buying it new.
Oh, definitely. And as we said throughout this interview, there are so many little things that if you don't pay attention or don't know about them, you may not take advantage of them, or you may not know how to make them work. And so that's what Josh's book is always for. Of course, TakeControlBooks.com.
Yeah, we covered very.
Sorry.
Yeah. I was going to say, we covered very little of it in this interview. We just touched on just a handful of things. This is a release with lots and lots of little small stuff, and a lot of things that are probably going to fix a lot of annoyances you've had for a while, because that's the case for me. So, I would encourage you to get the book and check it out and, see what you learn from it.
And of course, TakeControlBooks.com is where you go to get Josh's book, get Joe's book on macOS 15, and all the other Take Control authors producing great Take Control content. Josh, it's great to have you back. We got to do this again. I know we had talked about having you back to talk a little bit about prepper stuff from a tech standpoint. We got to get that scheduled.
Okay, yeah, we kind of touched on it on the holiday episode I did a while back, but yeah, we could definitely go over tech prepping, and so for people who don't know, I also contribute to a site called The Prepared. Adam Engst of Tidbits likes to joke that I'm the only Apple prepper guy on the whole internet. But the reality is, preparing for unfortunate circumstances is really just part of being a responsible adult. Like a lot of you watching right now are probably some sort of prepper. If you back up your computer, you're preparing for some eventuality, right? People like to think of preppers as paranoid. Are people who back up their computers paranoid? Like, what do you think is going to happen? Someone's just going to steal your computer. Your computer's just going to crash. Those things don't happen. So there's definitely a technology angle there. To having being prepared for unforeseen circumstances with your computer and especially your data.
Yeah, we got to get that done because unfortunately, I know that you've seen the same things I have on the evening news. A lot of people being hit by fires, floods, everything, and so it's not just we tend to joke about that kind of thing as politically motivated, and it really should have nothing to do with that. It should just have to do with some good common sense things that you can do, and especially for this show, from a tech standpoint, to make yourself a little better prepared. So, yeah, we'll get Josh back as the only Apple prepper on the internet. We got him. We got him. Josh, thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is MacVoices. I'm looking to iOS and iPadOS 15. After all the hype and all the selling and all the betas, now I want to get my hands on it and play with it. And Josh's book is going to be my guide. It should be yours too. Until the next time, and as always, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you MacVoices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.